All right. All right, Representative, we can get started.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us this morning. You know, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank what I consider is the best state delegation in Texas. And we're all looking forward to the new addition to our team, Claudia Ordaz, who's going to bring her unique, strong municipal government perspective and make our team even stronger for the citizens of El Paso County. For the next hour, we'll be discussing what voters need to know in order to successfully and safely vote during this upcoming 2020 election. Ms. Lisa Wise and Ms. Christina Adkins will give us an overview of voter registration, vote by mail, early voting, election day, and what voters can expect at the voting booth. Towards the end, we will be answering questions from constituents that were submitted in advance, and we will be answering as many questions as time permits. But if we do not get to your question, we will circle back to you and answer them as soon as possible. It's my pleasure to get to introduce my friend, Ms. Representative Lina Ortega. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend and colleague, Representative Art Fierro, and good morning to everyone. Today we are joined by other members of the El Paso delegation, Senator Jose Rodriguez, Speaker Pro Tem Joe Moody, and Representative Cesar Blanco. We also have with us today is our County Elections Administrator, Lisa Wise, and Christina Adkins from the Texas Secretary of State Elections Division. Lisa Wise has been our County Elections Administrator since 2000. Wise hard sure that El Paso conducts fair, safe, and accessible elections during every election cycle. She has helped enhance access to voting for El Pasoans through an award-winning county elections website. She has ensured through the Disability Rights Texas Act that every voting site is ADA compliant, and she has worked with our schools and organizations across El Paso County to register and educate voters. Christina Adkins is the legal director for the Texas Secretary of State Elections Division. Ms. Adkins has served as an appointed voting system examiner and specializes in election technology issues and developing standards to train election officials. Both of our guest panelists this morning are experts and strong advocates for fair and free elections in El Paso and across the state of Texas. We are excited that you have chosen to, we're very excited that they have chosen to spend some time with us to share their knowledge. I will now turn this over to also my friend and Speaker Pro Tem, Representative Moody, to explain why this election is such a historical one, not only in our city, but in our state.
Hey, good morning. Thank you all for having me, and it's a pleasure to be with all of you virtually. Just want to talk a little bit about this election. I know we hear it talked about as historic, and it's historic for a lot of reasons, but some of those reasons are outside the political realm, right? You've got an unprecedented number of people that have already voted in this country, and we expect a similar result. We've got a record number of registered voters here in Texas. You know, I don't think it's news to anybody. This will be the first major election to take place during a pandemic, and so that presents a lot of issues that we have to confront. We're going to learn about here today how to do this safely and how to make sure that we still have our voice heard, given the constraints that we're under. Part of what we've seen, number of applications to vote by mail. And I think the numbers give you some perspective. The numbers, as of last Friday, the elections office here in El Paso had processed 27,513 ballots by mail, the applications they've received. The highest amount prior to this was 12,600. So that tells you where that stands and how much that's going to stress our systems. And so those are the things that the experts that we're going to hear from today are working on and making sure that they work seamlessly. We're going to have a lot of changes that take place within El Paso County regarding how we vote. We're going to see vote centers available on election day. It was the first time that we've seen those. We have a lot to cover, and want to make sure we inform people as best as possible. First, I want to turn to Christina because we're heading into the up to the first major deadline of election season. We're going to start hitting all the major deadlines, and that's for voter registration. So, Christina, can you talk to us about that?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Representative, and thank you to the rest of the delegation for inviting me to come participate today. I love getting to talk about elections, and this is the time of the year that we want to do that. So with respect to voter registration in Texas, we're in an amazing time period right now because we just hit 16.6 million registered voters, and that's through about mid-September. And we know there's a huge push to update registrations and increase registrations and register new voters in these few weeks leading up to our voter registration deadline for November, which for this election is October 5th. So Monday, October 5th is the voter registration deadline. That means that all individuals that need to make updates or register for the first time need to get their registration application turned in. October 5th is a postmark deadline. It's not a receipt deadline. So that means that if you're unable to, drive that application into your county voter registrar's office, you can put it in the mail, and as long as it's postmarked by that day, your registration will be processed, assuming you're otherwise eligible to register to vote. As far as how to register to vote, there's a couple of things I wanted to point out to you all. First and foremost, if you have moved within your county, maybe you just moved down the street, maybe you moved across the county or into a different city or town, you can actually update your registration online. If you go to the Secretary of State's website, votetexas.gov, and click on the register link, the first thing at the top of that page provides you two links. One, to Am I Registered? It gives you the opportunity to check the current state of your registration. The next thing that's on there is an online update form for those people that have moved within the county. So if you just need to update your address, that's a really fast, easy way to do it. So we'd recommend that your voters take a look at that option. For those people that maybe don't have access to a computer or are new registrants, one of the things that they can do is they can always go in person to their county voter registrar, which would be Lisa Wise's office, to fill out a voter registration application. You can print off a copy of an application online and walk that in or put it in the mail. Public libraries are also a really great source of voter registration applications. So if you have public libraries in your area that you can get to and that are open, you can always go pick up an application form there, or even fill it out and leave it with your public library as they can collect voter registration applications and turn them in. In addition to that, we know there's a lot of organizations that are really working hard to make contact with unregistered voters. They're sending out flyers, they're going door to door, they're setting up at community events. And so be on the lookout for other citizens out there that are helping to try to increase your opportunities to register to vote. So those are the things that you want to think about. Those are the upcoming deadlines and some ways that you can either update or register for the first time. And we encourage you to do so as quickly as possible. While it is a postmark deadline, the faster you move, the better off you're going to be, because it gives the county more time to get your application processed.
Great. Well, thank you, Christina, for that overview. More voters now are voting than ever before and deciding to vote by mail. I know when I was in the military, I voted by mail. But now we're going to hear from Ms. Lisa Wise a little bit about a recap on ballot by mail process for eligible El Pasoans and how that process will look for them. So Lisa, can you give us an overview of that?
Sure. Good morning, Representative Senator Lisa Wise, your El Paso County Elections Administrator. Thank you for having me this morning. I'm going to go over briefly our ballot by mail process. Representative Moody was right. We have an unprecedented number of requests that we've received in process so far, and the numbers continue to grow. We continue to receive requests every day. And we have our workers here working 16 hours, 16-hour days so far. We've been working about 6 in the morning until about 10 at night, and we'll continue to do that. Right now in the state of Texas, you do have to qualify to vote by mail. So we get a lot of calls from people who say, well, how come in this state I didn't have to do this or that? In the state of Texas, you do have to qualify. It's not what's called a no excuse ballot by mail. So if you qualify, in order to qualify, you fall under one of these categories. One is the 65 and over. That's the most used reason for requesting a ballot by mail. 2 would be if you're going to be out of the county on election day or during early voting, and you will have to provide an address. I'm sorry, early voting and election day. You will have to provide an address for us to send the ballot out of county. You are incarcerated but still have your voting rights intact. And then if you are disabled or sick. Those are the qualifications in the state of Texas. So right now, we are still processing requests. The deadline to request a ballot by mail in our office is the 23rd, and that is received, not postmarked. So that's a little different than the voter registration deadline. We must have it here in our office by October 23rd. Once you request that ballot, we will process that here in-house. We will send you out a ballot, and we're sending out ballots daily. Yesterday, I think we sent out about 2,100 ballots. Once you receive that ballot, you will have instructions in there, and we encourage everyone to please read those instructions. It talks about the postage that's required, which we're recommending 70 cents for most of the county. However, if you are in the city of Socorro, you have additional propositions making your ballot $1.40 for the return. So that's all listed in there. We talk about making sure that you return it in the carrier envelope, which requires your signature, and that is something that we really try to impress upon our voters, is that you need to sign that carrier envelope. And it's very easy to see that. It's on basically where the envelope closes, and that just shows you did sign it and then it has not been tampered with since that signature. Once you put that back in the carrier envelope, you have the right to either put it back through the mail with the postage that we recommend, or because of the governor's proclamation with the pandemic, you are now allowed to also drop that off at our office. We have a drop spot that we started on Monday. It used to be you can only do that on election day. However, we started receiving ballots back on Monday down here at the early voting clerk's office. So at the El Paso County Courthouse, it's very easy to see. It's on the Campbell Street side, the east side. If you pull up, we will bring out the log, and you'll sign the log. You'll hand over your carrier envelope, just as if you were going to put it in the mail. You will produce one of the 7 acceptable forms of ID or a supplemental document, if that's what you have, and you'll turn the ballot in. We've collected over 100 ballots so far. Every day we've got a pretty decent line of people just driving up and turning those in. Once those ballots are dropped off, they're vaulted, they're put in a sealed box, put in the vault until we take them to our committees. And the committees are the Signature Verification Committee and the Early Ballot Opening Board. The Signature Verification Committee looks and makes sure that it is signed and that it's matching. If there's a question on that, then we'll go to the Early Ballot Opening Board and they'll review the signature. They also process them ready to go through the scanner. Then they go to the central count, and that's where they are scanned. And then once they're scanned, they're sealed and vaulted for 22 months as required by law. So we do keep those. We have a very strict chain of custody on those paper ballots. If you want to make sure that your ballot was returned, we do have a hotline set up, 834-8222. However, if you don't remember that number and just call our main line at the 546-2154, we will get you over there. They have been taking calls verifying that ballots have been received and answering really any question about ballot by mail. We are asking, by law, we don't need to, those ballots are supposed to be back on November 3rd by 7 p.m., the close of polls, or if there is a readable postmark prior to the close of polls, we are able to take them on November 4th by close of business. But we're really encouraging voters, do not hold on to these ballots, turn them in. You know, we've all heard that the post office is saying maybe a 7 to 10 day process for these ballots. Right now, we have not seen that. We've been getting them back very, very quickly. But we are encouraging people, do not hold on to those. Please put them back in the mail or bring them to our office. so that we have enough time to get them processed and everybody's not waiting until the last minute. That's one of the things that we've always been telling people, please do not wait until the last minute to get those in. Return them as soon as possible.
Ms. Wise, this is Senator Rodriguez. Thank you for that very important information. I also want to thank you and your hardworking staff for the hours that you're putting in to ensure that we have a safe and efficient election process here in El Paso County. And you know, we all know that voting by mail doesn't have to be that complicated. It can be as easy as voting in person if we understand the rules and the processes. And so we appreciate what you all are doing. But speaking of that, I'd like to ask Ms. Adkins a question about whether she can highlight information for us regarding early voting, those people who want to go and vote early in this election. Ms. Adkins?
Yes, sir. So early voting is a great option, you know, for some people that are not eligible to vote by mail, or even those that are but prefer to vote in person. Maybe they prefer using the equipment to assist them in marking their ballot privately and securely. Early voting is a great option. Early voting for this election this year begins October 13th and runs through October 30th. We actually do have an extra week of early voting. Ms. Wise mentioned earlier that the governor suspended some laws with respect to the election code to allow that hand delivery of mail ballots for a longer window. In that same suspension action, it also increased the early voting period by an extra week on the front end. So there's lots of opportunities for a person to get to go to the polls in person. And we strongly recommend that if you want to vote in person and you intend to vote in person, that you consider voting during that early voting period. And there's a number of reasons why we suggest this. First and foremost, if you have any problems when you're trying to vote, if you go to present yourself to vote and your name is not on the list of registered voters, you don't have the right ID, or there's just some kind of issue that occurs in that check-in process, it gives us time to try to resolve the issue. You know, if you have any concerns about the process itself, or you're having problems in trying to vote, you can contact the El Paso County Elections Office, you can contact our office, and we want to try to help you in that moment. We find that it's better to try to resolve that situation as it's happening than to wait, because if we're resolving it when it happens, then it increases the likelihood of you being able to vote a regular ballot, which is what our goal is in the elections process. Also, in locations, and you can go anywhere in your county to vote early. Now, I know in El Paso County, this is going to be your first election with vote centers, and we're very excited for you all, because that means you're going to have that same opportunity on election day as well. You're not restricted to a single location. But remember, for the early voting process as well, you can go anywhere, so you can find a location that's convenient to you. It also means that, you know, if you've got long lines in one place, you've got opportunities to find another location that might be close by that is a little bit more speedy in getting through that process. Is if you are somebody that recently moved to El Paso County or to another neighboring county, but you haven't yet updated your registration, you have more options available if you missed that registration deadline. So if you did move from one county to another and either didn't get your update in time, you just hadn't changing your registration, you can still vote what's called a limited ballot. To vote a limited ballot, you go to your county early voting clerk's office. In El Paso County, that would be Lisa's office. And you would fill out what's called a limited ballot application, and you would vote for all of the races that are in common between your two counties. And so obviously it's going to be our statewide races like president, U.S. senator, but there might also be some other district offices that might also be in common depending on where it is that you that may have recently moved and want to make sure that they're exercising their right to vote to the extent that they can. Another thing that we want to remind you of when you vote early is that the process for voting early is very much going to mirror the same process. When you go to the polls, there's certain things that you need to remember to bring with you. First and foremost, we're asking that all of our voters bring a mask with them. We very much want our voters to be wearing masks when they vote. This is something that's strongly recommended while it's not mandated, because we can't impose additional requirements on a person exercising their right to vote. We strongly, strongly, strongly recommend that you wear a mask. This is for your own protection and for the protection of the workers that are in that location. Because our early voting workers and our polling place workers really are performing a civic duty in working elections. It's a very hard job with very long hours, and we want to keep them as safe as possible and really sure that you're bringing your voter ID. Lisa made reference to either want one of voting ID, impediment declaration. If you're concerned as to what ID you have, as to whether or not it's an acceptable ID or whether it can be used, I would encourage you to go to votetexas.gov. Votetexas.gov has information right on the front page about voter ID, so you can go to that page, you can click on the voter ID link, and you can see the full list of IDs. Alternatively, if you have questions, you can call us or call Lisa, and I'm sure we'd all be able to help you identify what ID that you have would work for voting purposes. In addition to that, the other thing that I want to suggest with voting early that you take with you to the poll or that you consider when you're deciding when and where to vote is that right now, this is our first election in Texas where we do not have straight ticket voting. I know there might be a little confusion over that because there was some litigation about that, about straight ticket voting coming back. However, the Fifth Circuit did issue a ruling putting in place a stay, which means that the law is what it is right now without any changes. Means there's no straight ticket voting on your ballot. And so that means it's going to take you a little bit longer if you're somebody that's accustomed to that. And so voting early without the pressure of election day gives you a little bit more time in the voting station to make sure that you can mark your selections. In addition to that, we strongly recommend that maybe you pull off a sample ballot from the El Paso County Elections website or contact El Paso County and ask for your sample ballot so that you can review your selections ahead of time. And then one other thing I'd like to mention with respect to that, and this is true for in-person voting early or on election day, is that don't forget to go all the way down to the bottom of your ballot. There are a lot of local elections that take place on this November election and the Senate race and the ones that are very high profile, but those races that are towards the bottom of the ballot, your cities, your school districts, your water districts are all very, very important. And there might be a few more of them this election because we did have a number of entities that postponed their election due to COVID-19 concerns. So just make sure you're taking the time to go all the way down and look at all of your options there. And that's one of the reasons why we would suggest that you take like a sample ballot with you or take the time to review it ahead of time so that you're not surprised with what you see on your ballot in the polling location.
Thank you, Christina, for all of those great ideas and for explaining the importance of why you should vote early. And I also want to thank the work of course, of the El Paso County Elections Department. El Pasoans for this election are going to be able to choose from 35 different early voting locations. And while we encourage people to vote as early as possible, and that is what I like to do. Obviously, you're not going to have to face long lines if you vote early. And it doesn't take that long because you basically get to walk in. So again, I would encourage everybody for the reasons stated by Christina and to go out there and vote early. But Lisa, we know that sometimes people just prefer to vote on election day. Could you discuss, Lisa, what voting on election day will look like in El Paso?
Sure. So I definitely want to echo what Christina said, though, before I begin on this, which is that we encourage people to vote early if possible. One of the things that we did add that I just want to kind of add on the early voting is that the last week of early voting, we have what we're calling 10 till 10. And there's 10 sites throughout the county that'll be open till 10 p.m. that week. So if you are somebody who's working late or anything like that, we have those options that last week. So I did want to add that. And that we do encourage vote early for all of the reasons Christina said. Now, if you are either an elections purist or you just don't get out during early voting and you choose to vote on election day, the biggest thing that you'll see different this election is the vote centers. And we're really excited to bring this to El Paso County. We've always had people that say, why can't we do election day like we do early voting? That's always been something that we've been addressing. So this time we can. And we actually added sites rather than consolidating for election day. We maintained as many many of our precinct locations that we could, with respect to COVID or something like a construction, and unless that's going on, we kept those open. And then we did add into our regular polling sites, our high traffic early voting sites that we may not have used in the past, such as Bassett Center or Marty Robbins or Doris Van Dorn Library over on the west side. So there's 150 choices. Election day. We'll be open obviously 7 to 7, the same hours as we generally are on election day. On our website, epcountyvotes.com, we will have the locator and the wait times listed. So if you allow them to use your location, they'll be able to tell you exactly where you are as in reference to the early voting locations and the vote center, and what the wait times are at those locations. So if the line is long, you can decide, hey, I'm going to go down the street to another location. And with 150 across the county, there's really not that long to go between each of those sites. One of the other things I did want to talk about election day that Christina did mention also is that sample ballot. Paso is a very, they tend to use that straight ticket option. So for our voters, we are really encouraging them to do, as Christina said, to get on our website at EP County Votes. We have precinct specific sample ballots, so it will look exactly like what your ballot will look like on site. And you can review that ahead of time. Even, fill it out if you want. Take that with you. Obviously, you're not allowed to share that. You're not allowed to promote that as electioneering, but for your own reference, you are allowed to do that. In El Paso County, and this is something that's different than I think maybe all of the other counties, El Paso County has traditionally placed their local entities above the partisan ballot. So we do continue to do that. So the ballot is long, but you will see your school districts, your cities, those will be at the top before you hit the partisan races. So you can watch for that, but you definitely would benefit by looking at the sample ballot ahead of time. One of the other things that people have talked about is the possibility of the later results on election night. And this is something that even before this election, even in any election, and we really try to get people to understand this, is that election night, those results are not official, right? That's the majority of the votes. But we always have votes that are not included in that total. And that is why we have the deadlines for canvassing and things like that to make the election official. So even on election night, we will count every precinct from election day. But we will have 6 days for provisional ballots that may be outstanding. We will have the week for the military and overseas ballots that will be outstanding. And even some civilian ballots that may come in that day or the next day as allowed by law. So the results will not be final that night. They never are. But we do try to get as much into those numbers as we can. But again, that's what the law allows for those times, those days after the election, is for those outlying ballots to come in. One of the other things we are really promoting this election is the curbside voting. We will have 7 locations. Curbside is available at every location for voters who feel at risk going into the polling site. Now, these locations that are up on the screen right now are our 7 express curbside locations. And what those locations are providing during early voting and on election day is a separate team outside with the poll pads, with the curbside voting machines, everything out there ready to go so that voters can just drive up, cast their ballot, and go on. So they'll have to sign in just like they would inside, produce their ID, check in on the poll pad, but they won't have to either call ahead or honk or whatever that location generally requires for the curbside. These people will be outside. There'll be a canopy. There'll be tons of signage. We just ordered our floodlights and our heaters for the poll workers, those kinds of things. So we'll have all of those 7 sites set up for what we're calling express curbside voting locations, starting with early voting.
Thanks for all that information. And what I'm hearing over and over and over again in this presentation is that y'all have done an amazing amount of work to adjust for the situation that we are working through, that we're navigating. And you talked about so many different realities in a pandemic. And so I'll stop and want to reiterate something that was said already. Listen to all the work that's being done to make sure that you have your voting rights protected, to make sure that you can participate meaningfully in the process. And I heard one ask, and I want to reiterate it: wear a mask when you go in there. They can't require you to, but these folks are doing an amazing amount of work for longer hours than usual to take that one simple step, right? Because that's what wearing a mask is about, protecting people around you. So, express yourself however you want to do, but in that moment, if just be kind enough to look out for them. Ms. Wise, I can't thank you enough for all the work that you and your team are doing. I know I went in during the runoff and saw a very different experience. There were face masks and face shields and Q-tips and things like that. So what can voters expect when they walk in the polling site this time around?
Yeah, thank you. So we have been, like everyone else, trying to adjust the best we can to the pandemic. And in July, we had kind of a small little, I think, kind of a rehearsal on what would work, what wouldn't work with a smaller turnout. And we were able to look at that and tweak what we think we could do better for larger turnout. And we got all of our feedback was positive in July, honestly, about voters feeling safe casting their ballots and our poll workers feeling safe working. And that's exactly what we want to do. We want to make sure that for those people who either don't qualify by mail or don't want to vote by mail, have a safe voting experience, and the same for our workers. Because as Christina mentioned, these people, especially with our early voting, the long days, long hours, with the extended week, really out there a long time. And although they do get paid, trust me, those they're really putting in the effort to make sure that we pull this off without a hitch if we can. So some of the things that you saw in July, you're gonna see the social distancing. We're gonna be marking that out, just like you see at the banks, the stores, anything like that. Our masks, again, are strongly encouraged. Our poll workers will be required to wear masks. We will have masks on site for voters who maybe just forgot, but we are encouraging our voters to please mask up. This time, a little bit different will be our Vote Safe El Paso kit. We will have just one handoff between the poll worker and the voter. And in that kit, it's basically just a baggie with a little bit of a note in there that talks about what everything can be used for in that kit. It's going to have the disposable stylus, which is basically a large Q-tip that you can use on the express vote. There's also a finger cot in there that you can use on your fingertip so that you're not actually coming into contact with any of the either the poll pad or the express vote. There will be hand wipes in there. One of the things that we did notice during July was that people were using the hand sanitizer, which we greatly appreciate, although some people were, I think, using a lot of it, and it has a chance of dampening the ballots. So we're asking them to please use the wipes that we've included. And then we brought back the favorite I voted sticker. We did not hand that out in July because we were trying to avoid as many touch points as possible. However, by including it in the Vote Safe kit, we're able to hand it out. And we really wanted to give our El Paso sticker designer the opportunity to have at least one more big election with her fabulous El Paso Strong design. So that will be included. The other thing that's a little different is we're having what we're calling clean teams at every location. In July, we had the poll workers disinfecting after every voter and disinfecting throughout the day. And we realized that with that turnout in July, that was doable, but it will not be in November. So we will be having additional personnel every location for solely the purpose of making sure that where the location is clean. These will not be people who will process voters. These will be people who are just there to make sure that the location is clean, disinfected after every voter and every touch point.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that information. We're going to move on to the Q&A from our viewers today. And the first question is, I have been passing out voter registration applications. Some applications are addressed to Austin, Texas, and some are addressed to El Paso, Texas. How are they handled differently?
That's a great question. So if you have different return addresses on your applications, that means you probably got them from 2 different sources. The ones with the Austin address come straight to us, the Secretary of State's. We had some extra that were generic like that. Alternatively, El Paso County might be providing some that have the El Paso County address on there. Both are totally fine. Either one works. The one with the El Paso County address is going to go straight to the El Paso Elections Office, straight to Lisa, so it'll get there a little bit faster. If it comes to us, as long as it's got the right postmark deadline on there, we have a team of people that are here working long hours right now, sorting through applications that come in on a daily basis, sorting them, packaging them up and mailing them to the counties so that they have them in hand so that they can continue the processing on the county side. So either one works, and provided it's got the right postmark deadline, we will get your registration processed and get it to the right place.
Thank you, Christina. Appreciate it. Our next question is, do I need to bring my voter registration card with me to vote?
Go ahead, Lisa.
Christina.
Okay. Your voter registration card, no, is not required. If you have one of the 7 acceptable IDs, which would include a driver's license, an ID card, a handgun license, a passport, a military ID card, or a certificate of citizenship, if you have any of those IDs, then you don't need your voter registration certificate. However, if you do not have one of those 7 acceptable IDs, those first listings, if you do not have one and cannot reasonably obtain one, then you can use one of the supporting IDs, or the List B IDs that we call them. And a voter registration certificate is a great option there. So if you have that, validate your identity, you'll just have to complete an extra form in the polling place called the Reasonable Impediment Declaration, but it shouldn't be much of a challenge to complete that. It's a pretty fast process.
Great. This next question is probably for Lisa. Now that El Paso has vote centers, can I still vote at my old precinct polling location?
Sure. So as long as your old precinct polling location is still open, you can. And like I said, we did not close any location unless it was something like under construction, which we normally would have to move that location anyway. We did have to close 4 locations, at least for this election, because they were assisted living centers. And during the pandemic, obviously, we're not able to utilize those. But the list is on our website at epcountyvotes.com for people's reference. But if your polling site is the location that you've normally gone to, yeah, you absolutely can use it. The only difference is that everybody could use that location too. They don't have to live in that precinct any longer. But we kept 99% of our precincts are still the same as we've had in the past.
Okay, great. Another question. I requested a mail-in ballot, but I no longer want to vote by mail, but would rather vote in person. What do I need to do?
I'm so glad this question got asked, because this was something I wanted to cover actually, and I just remembered that I didn't do it when we were talking about the ballot by mail. So there's a lot of people now that we're hearing from, and this happens every November, where people either requested an annual ballot by mail, maybe back in January or February. This election has really got me amped up. I really want to go to the site. So there's 2 options that you have if you requested a ballot by mail and now you've changed your mind. So if you've got the ballot and you've got the ballot with you, the best thing to do is to bring that to the polling site and surrender it. If you have the ballot and you surrender it, then you're able to vote a regular ballot. If you cannot find the ballot or do not have it anymore, you will have to come to the polling site and vote a provisional ballot. And what that provisional ballot does is that gives us 6 days by law to verify that that ballot by mail was not returned. Those are your 2 options, but we're telling people if you have it, bring it with you so that you can just surrender it. That's the preference, but we don't want someone to think because they don't have it anymore that they won't be able to vote at the polling site. They still can show up, they'll just vote provisionally. Those provisional ballots, everybody talks about, well, we don't know if those provisional ballots get counted. We only think you count those if the race is close. That's completely false. As long as you signed the provisional ballot envelope, which is something that we really have to remind our voters to do, and then have the correct ballot and are registered, then it's fine. Then we will process that.
Okay, another question is, if I want to volunteer at the polls, what do I need to do?
So it depends what you're looking to do. Right now, in the state of Texas, our judges and alternate judges are appointed by the political parties for this upcoming November. However, basically, when they start to look like they're going to run short on people, they may contact us, and then we have a list that we go through with them to appoint poll workers. So I always tell people to start with the party of their choice and let them know that you're interested in working. However, you also could contact us, and we could place you once we know where they're unable to place workers.
Okay, and I like this question. Will you be giving out my I voted sticker this election?
Yes, we will. So I know that was a real bummer in July. We had people who love that sticker. So, and we really are proud of that sticker too, because we had that I voted sticker contest this year, and we had a high school student who designed the winning one, and it's El Paso Strong. It's really reflective of our community. And so that will be in the Vote Safe El Paso kit. So every voter will get that with their disposable stylus and their other items in that kit.
Well, thank you so much, Christina and Lisa, for all that information. I think we're going to hand it off to our next speaker for a few more remarks.
I'm the next speaker, but and I apologize to Lauren for not putting my questions into the chat box. They just occurred to me. If I may ask them, and they're related. The first one is with regard to the declaration of reasonable impediment that you referred to, Ms. Wise. I wonder if you could explain that for people that are listening as to what that declaration is and how does it come into play.
Sure. So the reasonable impediment is something that a voter fills out if they were unable to obtain one of the 7 forms of ID. So like Christina mentioned, let's say you aren't able to get a driver's license or a passport or a conceal and carry or gun, one of the items that they produce that does count, that does qualify. Then there's a list of what we call list B, which is supplemental documents, and those are again available on the state's website and on ours on epcountyvotes.com. So if you have one of those, your voter card, a utility bill, there's a pretty lengthy list there that you can bring. You'll bring that with you, and then you'll fill out this form that just basically states that you were unable to obtain one of those 7 forms of ID. It's a short form. It really doesn't take that long to fill out, but that is one of the that was one of the parts of the new ID law, was that there was an option for someone who did not have one of those 7 forms of ID, and that is what that list B and that reasonable impediment declaration, or RID, is what we call it. That's what that provides for the voter.
Okay, and my second question, maybe it's for Ms. Adkins, but also you, Ms. Wise. It's related to, I think, to this issue of the reasonable impediment declaration. In our office, we received a message from a mother who basically said that her 18-year-old was going to be voting for the first time. So the 18-year-old tried to get a voter ID from the DPS office here in El Paso, and was told that the only way would be to make an appointment, but that appointments were not being taken until after November the 3rd. So obviously that person, if they're aware of the reasonable impediment declaration, Ms. Adkins, can go to the polling place and say that they want to fill one of those declarations out in order for them to vote, right?
Yes, sir.
But if they're not aware of it, and it's a first-time voter, is the Secretary of State's office or the County Elections Department or somebody putting out information that that would enable similar potential voters like this young 18-year-old to realize that they can go vote even though they can't get an appointment with the DPS for a voter ID until after November.
I'm really glad you asked it, because it's not even just voters that maybe newly turned 18 that didn't have a driver's license or ID card, but we've been getting questions from voters who may have an expired driver's license and they need to update that driver's license. So there's kind of two things I'd like to point out there, and thank you for the opportunity to do so. First, for those individuals that may have a license or an ID card that's expired, if it's expired, it's still good if it's expired within 4 years. So you've where you can still use that ID. If you're 70 years old or older, then that expiration is indefinite. So you're not bound by that 4-year window. If you know you have a friend or neighbor or relative that's in their 80s but maybe hasn't updated their driver's license in the last 2 years, as long as they have that, they can still use it. Now, for our newer registrants, or people that are new to Texas or just new to getting a driver's license or ID card, if you're not able to get that appointment, that is completely understandable, and that is exactly why that RID process say that definitely want to be on the lookout for that voter registration certificate, because that's exactly the kind of ID that you would want to bring to show to be able to complete the reasonable impediment declaration. We have been in contact with DPS about this because they've been getting questions about that too, and I believe they were making some updates to their website. We have information on our website about this process, and so we would encourage people to go to votetexas.gov to read more about it. And just know that you do have options. If you're in that situation, you do have options. And if you want to talk through your specific situation and talk to us about the types of IDs that you do have, please call us, and we're happy to work one-on-one with voters to help make sure that they have what they need.
Well, thank you very much for that. And I certainly want to thank you and Ms. Wise for all of the valuable information you have provided today. I think one of the most critical issues that we can address is to let people know, as we have here in this town hall, that it is important to make plans to go and vote, given that we're in this pandemic. And so people need to know in advance when they're going to vote, where they're going to go vote, and be able to take care of those logistics in advance so that they can be prepared to have a good experience in voting in this election. So thank you all very much for that. We appreciate your time.
Great, thank you, Senator. Consequences, and not voting has consequences. And again, thank you to our guests today, Ms. Christina Adkins with the Secretary of State, and our own Lisa Wise. And thank you for the great jobs that both of you are doing for us and sharing this great information. Just a quick reminder, this would not have happened without the help Cassandra Rita with Lena Ortega's team, Lauren Jones and Catherine Longoria. I know they spent hours and hours trying to put this together, and it seemed to have gone seamless. Thank you to the delegation for all the information. And again, thank you to Christina and Lisa for sharing the information to keep us safe and getting our votes counted. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.